My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Hi, I'm Annie Croner, and today's leadership quote comes from Margaret Thatcher. Don't follow the crowd, let the crowd follow you.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become irreplaceable, game-changing leader assistants. Subscribe at podcast.leaderassistant.com.
Hey everybody, it's episode 26.
Annie Croner has been an assistant for over 17 years. She started WholeAssistant.com out of a strong desire to empower and encourage other assistants to create a career and life they love. Annie enjoys dancing tango, going to happy hour with her friends, and living in a house full of boys. You can catch today's show notes at leaderassistant.com/26. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. Today I'm excited to have Annie Croner from WholeAssistant.com on the show today. Hi Annie, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's start at not quite the beginning, but what was your very first job?
My very first job was working in a snack stand in the park when I was 15 years old. And my mom's best friend, she had two boys who were a year and 2 years older than I was. And so it was largely them and their buddies running the show, but and their grandparents owned the snack stand. And so they realized that they needed someone who would actually work the snack stand, not just hang out and play.
And eat the snacks?
So exactly. Yes. So that was my very first job. Actually, I really enjoyed it, even though I was around boys all the time. It taught me some really great lessons. I think, first of all, how to deal with the public. So we had this one gentleman who was always on his bicycle, who was homeless, who would always stop by and say hello. So I got interaction with a variety of different people, which is helpful for any of us, especially as assistants. So that was my very first job.
What was your favorite snack that you sold?
Well, actually, we made really good burgers. And I know that sounds weird, but my dad would actually stop by every day for a burger. And so I did like the burgers that we made. There was something about how these kids' grandparents season the meat that was really good.
Awesome. So when and why did you become an assistant?
So in college, I decided to take a year off and claim residency. I went to a state school that I wasn't a member of the state of. And so I decided to look for a position. And actually, a gal offered me a position. And I'm like, well, I don't have any experience. And she said, that's really good because that way you won't have any preconceived ideas. And I can kind of mold you into the administrative assistant I want you to be. And it was a receptionist role. I can actually kind of help you become what it is I think the receptionist should be and what we need for this current position. So I took the position and I liked it a lot. And then I also ended up working at, I studied theater design at the University of Iowa, and I ended up working in the theater office as well. And so those are my first two interactions. And I think for me at the time, it was just a way to pay the bills, even though I was good at it and I enjoyed it. And then post-college, the same thing kind of happened. I moved to Boston with my theater degree, and I was going to design for theater out there. And I took a position out there, and I just noticed that my boss, her name is Marianne, and we're still friends to this day, and I consider her my mentor. She was my boss in Boston at this consulting firm. And I just noticed how she interacted with her executive. She was also an executive assistant in addition to managing the office. And I just kind of sat back and admired how the relationship was just so mutually respectful. And at some point I ended up letting go of theater because the work-life balance wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to be in a theater all night and have a potential significant other work all day. And I had just noticed that anybody with any level of success in my world as a theater designer sacrificed a lot on the home front and on the personal front. And I was not willing to do that. And so I watched Marianne and her exec, and I just decided, that's what I want. That right there. I want the mutual respect. I want the partnership. I want the strategic partnering with my exec. And so I think that's what led me ultimately to consider what I do now as an executive assistant as a potential career path.
So you saw somebody else model a healthy assistant executive relationship, and you wanted that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what industries have you worked in as an assistant, and how long have you been one?
So I've been an assistant for nearly 18 years now, and I have worked in anything from churches. I've worked in 2 churches actually, to, consulting, to accounting. And I'm currently in the venture capital world. The executive I support works as a managing director in VC in a venture capital firm based in San Francisco. However, we are both in Colorado. So it's just he and I here. And I have to say I love it. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any interesting or crazy stories from your career as an assistant?
Oh my gosh, so many. So my favorite one, when I worked at an Episcopal cathedral for a while, a few years ago, and I found out that I was not only going to be managing like 3 or 4 executives, I was also going to be managing our crypts, which I didn't even know what a crypt was at the time. You hear like Tales from the Crypt and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, crypts, really? So I do have some crazy stories from doing that. One was this gal, they came to purchase a crypt with her son, and they decided that they wanted to purchase a specific crypt. And so the son asked the mom, this guy's in his 30s or 40s, asked his mom to take a picture of him standing on the crypt, because the crypts are in this sidewalk, in the sidewalk of the cathedral. And he texted the picture to his brother and was like, "We just bought real estate, sleeps for." And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just so crazy. So I have lots of experiences from crypt keeping that are just kind of off or a little bizarre that most people can't say they have, but I was an actual crypt keeper. So
for those listening that don't know what a crypt is, or those interviewing you that don't know what a crypt is, can you explain?
Yes. So a crypt it's a place where people put their ashes after they are deceased. So it's not like they don't actually put the full bodies in our crypts anyway. There are crypts where they do that, but they just put the ashes. So the church has this little plot it's a sidewalk actually, where you pull up the stone and then you bury the person and then you put the stone back. And so that is a crypt. I probably should have explained that up front. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I'm sure many people know what it is. I was homeschooled, so sometimes things slipped by. Well, is there a time when you saved the day? I'm sure there's hundreds of times when you saved the day, but is there a time you can think of or remember that kind of maybe it was a last minute crazy, you saved the day for your executive?
Yes, definitely. I think, recently we had something come up to where my executive was in Vegas and he needed to be home, and they had this crazy ice storm in Vegas, and they were grounding planes. And then we're like, okay, so let's see if we can get you to California to get a flight out. Well, the highway was actually closed to California. So then we're going the other way. So I think we finally got him a flight home. He had to take a car service 2 hours to get to his flight. I think it was in Utah was where his flight was, or Nevada, like Northern Nevada, something like that. I can't remember, but it was 2 hours away from Vegas. And he needed to be back because another person was flying in to meet with him the next day. So there was no option. Like, we had to get him back. And so, things like that come up fairly frequently. I think things where you can't control things that you can't control, like weather and people's schedules or things happening, just you have to kind of roll with those punches. So,
yeah. So what was the biggest mistake you've made as an assistant, and what did you learn from the experience?
Sure. So I think the biggest mistake I've ever made, I was working for this executive, and she was really, really great. And she told me up front, she's like, there are no boundaries with us. You cannot cross the line. She actually told me that you cannot cross the line. So I would submit wire transfers for her, and she would subsequently like approve them. So, she knew what was going on. But there was this one time where she was unreachable, and I submitted everything and approved it for her. And so I created like an electronic signature and then put that on the document, which I know I shouldn't have done. But at the time, it just seemed like what you do, right? Like, it just seemed like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do to get it done. And then I sent it, and then I had this sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I'm like, oh, she said that there are no boundaries between us. And she said that that I can't cross a line, but I think I just crossed a line. So I immediately wrote her an email, and I said, look, I'm very sorry. I'm guessing that you're probably not going to be okay with this, even though this is my understanding. I'd only been working there for just a few months, so we were still figuring each other out. And she called me immediately, and she's like, you know what? You're right. I am not comfortable with that at all. And she said, but thank you so much for telling me. And actually that incident really strengthened our trust of one another and our connection. Because I think from then on, she knew I'm a person of integrity and that she really could trust me. So anytime I ever hear of an executive assistant, trying to cover their tracks, I'm like, don't do that, girl. Just run with the solution, figure out the solution, and then run to your boss with it, because it can actually serve to strengthen your relationship. So I think that was a very valuable lesson I learned from a very sticky and not so great oversight and snafu on my part.
Wow. What's the one thing that you're most proud of?
I'm really good at developing methods and systems. And so I think one project that I'm really proud of most recently is implementing a CRM for our VC firm. And because it was a huge undertaking and I had to learn the platform, and I'd been a part of implementing another CRM at another place I'd worked. So I was familiar with the process, and I was familiar with the snags and the pushback we were going to get from some people. So I already knew that up front. And so, yeah, I think the one thing that I'm proud of is my ability to develop systems and to work with people in order to implement them, especially the CRM.
Yeah, it's one thing to implement a system. It's another thing to implement it where you consider everybody that has to use it, not just from one angle.
Yes. And that's a challenge, right? That's a big challenge. And also the resistance to change, because we've been doing things a certain way for so long. So I think both of those are the biggest challenges when you implement anything company-wide or department-wide, for sure.
What's one productivity hack you can't live without?
So I use Trello to manage my to-do list, and I put time parameters around every task on my list. And the reason I do this is because, I feel like it keeps my perfectionist tendencies at bay. If I only have a half hour to complete a task, then I'm not going to be obsessing over the right making sure the right thing is done or the right choice or like the right method. I'm just going to get it done. And so I think it does that. And I think another thing it does is it keeps me on task. Because in this world with so many distractions, and Jeremy, you've created a course about this, so many distractions, it can be really easy to get distracted and to like pop onto Facebook or whatever. But if I'm going to get something done, I'm going to get it done in this amount of time. I do not have the bandwidth or energy or time to go in and look at Facebook or to get distracted or to noodle around on my phone. So I think that's one productivity hack that I've really been enjoying lately.
What are some things that you've seen executives do really well when working with their assistants?
I think trust is a big thing. And so I think letting go is another thing. So those two go hand in hand. So once you've developed a trust with your executive, and there are several ways to do that I won't go into right now. I feel like executives, I know for myself, whenever I'm trusted to make a decision, then I'm just that much more invested in my role. And so I think as much as they can let go, and I think that's the hardest part for executives sometimes is letting go, and trusting that their executive assistant has their back. I would say that is one thing that really makes an executive stand apart from other executives in terms of being easy to work with, in terms of people wanting to work with them, in terms of developing a great long-term relationship with your executive assistant and not just kind of burning through them, And I think also mutual respect. If you can respect what your assistant does, even though you may not know the full capacity, and if your assistant's really doing her job, you won't know the full capacity of what he or she does. So just recognizing that while you understand some of what she's doing or he's doing, you don't have the full picture, because if they're worth their salt, they're doing their job behind the scenes, and you may not even know all of what that job entails. So I just think that mutual respect is another thing I found for myself anyway, that when I feel respected and when I feel valued and like a part of the team and like and trusted, that I perform so much better.
So what would you tell an assistant who is not being respected in their role by their executive?
I think for me, it comes down to, if you're new at your role, it may take some time to gain that trust. I know what colleague of mine, it took her over a year to gain her executive's trust. And I think trust and respect go hand in hand, but they are different. So if you're feeling like you may not have your executive's trust yet, but you still feel respected, I would say stick it out. You'll get there eventually. If it's a thing where you're not feeling respected at all, like you don't feel heard, you don't feel valued, you don't feel respected, I would say have an honest conversation with your executive about it and figure out those things that led you to say those reasons why you don't feel respected. And, ultimately, if nothing changes, then you have a choice to make as to whether or not you want to stay in that role. That would be what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. So. What's one thing you would tell someone who's about to start their very first assistant job?
I would just tell them to be flexible, to come at it with a heart of learning and a heart of service and a heart of really wanting to help, and to have open, honest communication with their executive if they don't understand something, to make sure they get very clear on what's being asked and required of them, and then to take it one step further, to fill in the gaps for their executive, as well as to do everything that is asked of you, to take it one step further and take the initiative to actually do things prior to being asked.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about WholeAssistant.com and why you started it.
Sure. So Whole Assistant was I mean, it's funny. I woke up one morning a little over a year ago with this just crazy desire to write about what we do as assistants. And I couldn't shake it. And as much as I tried, because I'm busy already, and I'm like, you know what, I can't not do this. I can't not, because I think the reason why is because I felt like I finally had a career I loved and was in a position where I was truly fulfilled and wanted to share about my journey on how I got here. Because I've not always had great positions, and I have not always had positions that I loved or felt valued in, but I'd finally found just the right mix of what I was hoping for in a career. And I began to realize, looking back over my years as an assistant, that mindfulness and intentionality played a role in my journey. And I think so often we go through life on autopilot, accepting whatever we're handed without really considering what it is we want. And I feel like we can do that in our careers too. And I wanted to encourage other executive assistants that if this is not your ideal role, if you're not currently in your ideal role, it's okay to get clear on what you want and then to start working towards that. So, I wanted to be a force of encouragement and empowerment for assistants to be able to steer their careers in the way they want them to go.
So what's kind of your passion, maybe your 2-sentence encouragement to assistants with the mindfulness and, the whole part of whole assistant?
Yeah. So in order to be a whole assistant, you first have to be a whole person. So figure out whatever fills you up and tap into those things.
That's great. So how's the reception been to your site, and maybe what's the challenge you've had about running it?
I think the challenge I have is just it's a lot to juggle. I would say the reception's been pretty good, really great, actually. Like, I think, as people discover me, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And I post videos weekly, or I try to post videos weekly. And I think the biggest thing is keeping up with the content. So I batch create content quarterly, which helps. And then I record my videos weekly. And I record them at 7 a.m. on Tuesday mornings, because that's the time I have. So I think that's the biggest thing is figuring out a process by which to manage everything. And I'm also in the process of creating my first course, and so managing, like, how do I find time to do that? I think, like, finding the time and being intentional about my time every minute of every day is key for me.
So how has your executive been supportive of your new side hustle?
It's so funny you asked that, because when I first approached him with this, I'm like, so I need to talk to you about something. Like, I feel like I can't not do this. I feel like I have to do this. And he said a couple things. First of all, he said, well, that's how you know it's right. And I fully support this. And he said, and I know that you already know this, but please don't mention, me or my family or like the company we work for. Like, please just leave it out of it. And like, of course. And I would never consider, like, it's just what we do as assistants. We have integrity, and we don't want to, we protect our people. And I am very protective of my executive and his family and the company I work for. So I would never want to do anything like that anyway. And he knew that. So I think he trusts me in that. And so he's kind of been my cheerleader, which is really great.
That's great. So if there are assistants listening that want to start a blog, do you have any tips for them?
Yes, I think my biggest tip is just start. I feel like in this space, there's still so much. We're not oversaturated by any stretch of the imagination. We could use more voices. We can use more input and insight. And I think people are thirsty. I think executive assistants are thirsty for And that's one of the things I love about us as a group is that we genuinely want to do a good job. We genuinely want to, we want to find resources and utilize those resources. So if you're considering starting a blog, just do it. Just go for it. You know, you can always pivot. You can always adjust. You can always change things up. It's a lot of work, but it's also for me, it's very rewarding and very fulfilling. So.
Yeah. So if you could snap your fingers and instantly give all assistants more of something, what would it be?
Well, honestly, I think this is going to be very pragmatic and very practical. I think I would give assistants the empowerment to structure their time in a way that is the most beneficial for them and that is actually a form of self-care for them. And by that, I mean, like, as I've studied time management and as I've delved into that, like that whole world, which is relatively new for me. I've been an assistant for 18 years and I've really been a student of time management for the last 3 years. I've just found that like it really is for me a self-care technique. Like if you have a time management system that works for you, that's good self-care. And I had never noticed that prior and I kind of wish I had. So I think that would be one thing that I would tell assistants is to really spend the time on figuring out a time management system that works for you. And the other thing would be that it is okay to set healthy boundaries and it's okay to say no from time to time in a very polite, very kind way. But I found that it actually increases respect for me. And I don't mean like you march in and you make an announcement that this is my boundary. No, I mean like in our daily responses to people and to individuals and to our executives and to our coworkers and to even people in our lives, like, okay, well, I will be happy to get to that, but this is my number one priority, you know? So really just being clear on what your priorities are and setting healthy boundaries in order to achieve those priorities.
That's great. What do you think makes an assistant a leader?
I think what makes an assistant a leader is someone who is willing to take the reins when necessary and also know when to like back off and finesse when necessary. I think a good listener makes a good leader. And so I think as assistants, when we listen to what's actually going on, when we take a bird's eye view and we're still in the weeds, all those kind of qualities that make an assistant a really great assistant. And also taking the lead on helping your executive with things they may not know they even need help with, you know. I know for myself this last year, I helped my executive get very clear on his priorities. And we had a whole day of goal planning and goal setting. And so holding that space for my executive was really helpful for him. And it also set me up to lead more. And he's trusted me with making more like high level decisions as a result of doing that. So I think it's just taking the initiative. And I think those things make a great leader and an assistant. And I feel like more and more assistants are being required to lead and asked to lead. So,
yeah, agree. I like the listen part. That was great. Leaders definitely need to listen. So, where can we support you online? Wholeassistant.com is definitely one. Is there somewhere else we can find you or something we can do to support you?
You know, I think just go to wholeassistant.com. That's my hub. I think I've got a Facebook group in there if you would like to join a group of growing executive assistants. And stay tuned. I'm going to be doing free Trello workshops and stuff like that. And so really, it's so interesting to be asked how people can support me because I've just been so focused on supporting other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's
supporting other EAs.
Yeah. I mean, that's why part of why I started the podcast was I want to be able to expose my listeners and assistants all over the world to different resources, like your website, and also just different styles. So, you know, you mentioned earlier, like there's plenty of there's plenty of assistance to go around in the sense of we could always use another blog or resource for assistance. Everybody's got their unique voice. Everybody's got their unique style. And, your style and your passion is different than my style and my passion. But the ultimate goal that we're all trying to do is trying to help assistants grow in their role and elevate the role of an assistant overall. And so anyway, thank you for joining, and we're happy to support you and partner with you. And I've done I guess we did was that a webinar or yeah.
We did. I interviewed you via video. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks again for taking time out of your day and joining us. And we'll definitely share all of the links to your site and Facebook group and all that in the show notes. And thanks again.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Talk to you soon. Thanks again for listening. Check out the show notes at leaderassistant.com/26. And if you haven't joined our Facebook community, you can join at facebook.leaderassistant.com. And lastly, I wanted to point you to goburrows.com/courses to check out my online courses for assistants.
Help my dad out and leave a review on iTunes. GoBurrows.com